The first thing Elliot noticed about Turea, California, was the quiet. It was a different kind of quiet than the one he carried inside. Out here, the silence wasn't heavy. It hummed in the breeze that moved through the redwoods and pressed down on the mossy forest floor. Sunlight sifted through giant trunks, speckling the earth with pale gold, and every sound, an owl's hoot, a distant truck, seemed far away, softened by 1,000 layers of green. Elliot didn't want to be here. Not in this small coastal town, not in this damp house with its peeling white paint, not with his mom who tried so hard it only made things worse. He walked a few paces behind her, hands deep in the pocket of his hoodie, eyes fixed on the path. He hadn't said a word since they'd left Portland. Hadn't said a word in over a year, really. Not since the divorce. Not since the shouting and the slammed doors. In the afternoon, his father's suitcase had disappeared from the hallway. He hated these walks. His mom said the trees would help, that fresh air was good for processing big feelings. He hated that phrase. He hated the way she kept glancing back, hoping he'd say something, anything. Instead, he let the silence swallow him whole. Every step crunched twigs and needles underfoot, but it felt like he was walking underwater, everything muffled, distant, slow. The deeper they went into the forest, the more alone they became. Sunlight faded, ferns brushed his legs. Somewhere above, a woodpecker hammered at bark. His mom finally gave up on talking and just walked ahead, letting him choose his own pace. That's when he saw it. A flicker of movement just off the trail. Small, low to the ground, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Curiosity was the one thing Elliot hadn't lost in all these months, and now it tugged at him, insistent. He slipped away from the path, his sneakers sinking into spongy earth, heart beating a little faster. There, beneath a fallen log tangled with lichen and roots, was a dog. Not just any dog, a collie, its coat a patchwork of sable and white, dirt-caked but still strikingly beautiful. One paw was twisted beneath her, muddy and raw, her body tense with pain, but her eyes, brown, liquid, bright with fear and hope, locked onto his, and in that instant the air between them changed. Elliot froze. The collie didn't move, didn't growl or bark. She just watched him, breathing fast but silent, as if she too understood that noise would shatter something fragile. For a long moment, neither moved. He took in every detail, the trembling in her shoulders, the ragged edge of one ear, the smudge of mud on her nose. He knelt, careful not to startle her, lowering himself, until they were eye to eye. In the silence, something passed between them. He recognized it. The same raw ache he saw in the mirror. The same guarded hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would stay and not turn away. His own fear met hers, and for once, it didn't feel so lonely. He reached for his sketchbook, pulling it from his backpack with slow, deliberate hands. He kept his eyes on the collie, flipping to a blank page, then set the pencil to paper. He didn't draw her whole body. Not yet. He drew her eyes, the only thing in the world that seemed real right now. His mom's voice called from somewhere up the trail, anxious and far away. He didn't answer. He couldn't. He just knelt in the damp shade, sketching while the collie watched him in wary silence. For a moment there was no pain, no anger, no voice trapped in his chest. There was just the forest, the sound of breathing, the scratch of pencil on paper, and the unspoken promise that, for now, neither of them had to be alone. When he finally stood, his knees aching, the collie still hadn't moved. He wanted to reach out, but something held him back. Respect, maybe, or the simple knowledge that trust had to grow in its own time. He tucked the sketchbook away and glanced over his shoulder, memorizing the spot. As he rejoined the trail, his mom spotted him and hurried over, relief in her eyes. She opened her mouth to scold, then stopped herself, just reaching for his hand. He let her take it this time. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Behind him, the collie's gaze followed. No words, no movement, just recognition. An understanding in the quiet that both of them had lost something, but maybe, if they were patient, they could find a piece of it again. And as they walked back their way through the redwoods, Elliot's thoughts were already spinning with ways to return. Not for himself, at least that's what he told himself, but for the dog who'd seen him, really seen him, without needing a single word. School had started 3 days after they arrived in Eureka. It was a low, foggy morning when Elliot followed his mom into the glass doors of Redwood Middle School, his backpack feeling twice as heavy as it had in Portland. The main office was warm and smelled faintly of printer ink and someone's vanilla coffee. His mom did most of the talking. Elliot just stood by the counter, clutching his sketchbook like a life jacket, gaze fixed on a scuffed tile near his shoe. He could feel the eyes on him, teachers sizing him up, a secretary offering a too bright smile, another student lingering in the doorway pretending not to stare. He'd grown used to that, the sideways looks, the whispered questions. Why doesn't he talk? What's wrong with him? Even here, 3 states away from the chaos of his parents' divorce, he couldn't outrun the silence. Mrs. Hart, his homeroom teacher, crouched down so she was eye level. "It's okay, Elliot," she said gently. "We're happy you're here. No rush. Just take your time." She said the words like she meant them, but he'd heard it before. In school, offices, therapy sessions, family dinners, grown-ups always sounded like they were talking to someone underwater. His mom squeezed his shoulder, her face shining with hope. He looked away. She'd started making promises to herself lately. New town, new start, new routines. She said it was a chance for both of them, but all Elliot felt was the pressure. Don't make this harder than it already is. Don't disappoint her. Classrooms were their own kind of wilderness. The hum of fluorescent lights, the scrape of chairs, the chatter that swelled and faded like wind through trees. He sat at the back, window seat, where he could lose himself in the view. He kept his head down, sketchbook open, lines flowing quietly across the page. He drew whatever kept his mind away from the ache. A branch twisted by the wind, the pattern of rain on glass, sometimes the face of the collie he'd found. Though he hadn't told anyone about her. Kids in Eureka were like kids everywhere. They noticed difference, and they circled it. A girl with chipped blue nail polish, Olivia, tried to talk to him before first period. "Hey, you're the new guy, right? What's your deal?" He didn't answer, just tucked deeper into his hoodie. She shrugged and moved on, but her friend, Cody, kept glancing at him during math, eyebrows raised as if waiting for a punchline. By lunch, the novelty had faded and the whispers started. He heard his name in fragments like static. "That's Elliot. He's the mute one." No, not deaf, just weird, I guess. He learned to recognize the signs, the shared glances, the snickers that died when he looked up, the way seats always filled on the far end of the table. No one saw the effort it took to walk into each class, to navigate the hallways, to keep his breath steady. Each morning he rehearsed a single line in his mind. "I'm Elliot." He never said it, not once, but repeating it felt like holding on to a life preserver in a storm. At home, the house was full of echoing space. His mom had filled the walls with old family photos, but the smiles felt distant, fossils from another life. She tried not to hover, but he caught her, watching him sometimes, eyes flickering between worry and hope. She'd started leaving sticky notes around the kitchen. "Love you. Have a great day. Don't forget breakfast." He never responded. He wished she'd stop asking him to be someone he wasn't sure he could find again. Therapy was Tuesdays and Thursdays. Dr. Simone's office was warm, filled with overstuffed chairs and a wall of fidget toys. She wore patterned scarves and spoke in a voice so calm it sometimes made Elliot restless. He liked her, in a distant sort of way, mostly because she didn't try too hard. She never asked why he wouldn't talk. She just waited, leaving silences hanging like open doors. Most sessions passed with Elliot drawing while she read reports or made notes in her planner. One day, she slid a box of colored pencils across the table. "You don't have to talk, Elliot," she said. "But if you ever want to tell me something with these, That's okay too. He nodded, grateful. He drew Luna, the collie, though he hadn't named her aloud. Just her eyes at first, then her whole body, thin and trembling, but full of light. After therapy, his mom would ask, "Did you have a good session?" Elliot would shrug, hiding his sketches away. At night, he'd lie awake, listening to the soft shush of rain on the roof, replaying the forest meeting in his mind. He wondered if the collie was still there, if she remembered him. He wondered what it would take for someone or something to trust him enough to stay. At school, his silence became a shield and a target. Teachers didn't call on him, but they watched him. In gym, he lingered on the edge, pretending to tie his shoes until class was over. Sometimes he'd catch snippets of conversation, Cody and Olivia laughing, someone grumbling about homework, a fight breaking out in the hall. He wished for just a second he could step into the noise, say something sharp or funny or brave, but the words stayed stuck, heavy in his throat. Every day after school, as soon as he was free, he walked straight for the woods. His mom thought he was just out for air, but he had a purpose. He checked the spot beneath the log each time, heart thumping with hope and fear. The collie was always there, watching him approach. He didn't talk, couldn't talk, but he learned how to say things anyway. With a quiet presence, a soft look, the gentle offering of a scrap of bread or a piece of cheese. In the hush of the forest, words didn't matter. He started calling her Luna in his mind. Something about her eyes, wide and alert, always catching the smallest sliver of light. He never spoke it out loud, not even in a whisper. But he wrote the name in the margins of his sketches. He drew her over and over. Luna waiting, Luna curled up beneath the ferns, Luna watching the path as if she too was waiting for someone to come back. Some nights he dreamed of talking to her, not in words, but in pictures. He'd show her everything he couldn't say, the hurt, the hope, the wish to be seen and chosen. In those dreams, Luna always understood. She never turned away. Elliot's world stayed small and quiet, but a spark had caught. Something new and uncertain. He didn't trust it yet. But he found himself waking each morning with a reason to try again, to return to the woods, to share that silent space with the only soul who seemed to speak his language. And maybe, just maybe, he began to believe that the silence wasn't a prison. Maybe, with Luna, it could be a kind of home. Every day after school, Elliot slipped quietly out the back door, careful not to make a sound. His mom usually lingered in the kitchen, pretending to be busy with something on her laptop or humming to the radio. But he knew she was listening, waiting for any sign he might want to talk or just stay close. He never did. The woods were the only place he felt less visible, and yet more himself. Elliot made a habit of walking the same narrow path through the redwoods, boots crunching on the thick mat of fallen needles, the air heavy with earth and distant ocean mist. He'd stopped fearing the solitude out here. The trees stood like silent guardians, never asking questions, never expecting anything. The forest became his confidant, holding all the words he couldn't say. And somewhere within it, so did Luna. He always checked the spot beneath the old log first. Some days Luna was curled tightly, head resting on her paws, ears flicking at every stray sound. Other days, she watched him from a careful distance, wary but curious. The first time he'd returned after their initial meeting, he'd brought food, a hunk of bread, a slice of cheddar, a piece of cooked chicken he'd wrapped in napkin and tucked inside his jacket pocket. He didn't try to touch her or call out. Instead, he simply sat down in the moss, a few yards away, and set the food gently on a flat stone. Luna stared at him, tense and trembling, but hunger won out over fear. She waited until Elliot moved back a bit farther, then crept forward, each paw landing silently as a feather. She sniffed the bread, gave it a cautious lick, and in seconds it was gone. When she raised her head, crumbs on her whiskers, their eyes met again, this time less fearful, more searching. From then on, Elliot made the trip daily, bringing fresh cloth and bottled water, bits of meat or cheese. Sometimes an apple sliced and dusted with cinnamon because he thought Luna might like the sweetness. He never made sudden movements. He never spoke. Everything he did was deliberate, gentle, as if the air between them might shatter if he rushed. One afternoon, under the watchful hush of the trees, Elliot saw that Luna's wound had grown worse, a red, angry line above her paw, oozing slightly. Panic fluttered in his chest, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. He unzipped his backpack and laid out his supplies. A clean washcloth, a bottle of water, a tiny tube of antibiotic ointment he'd taken from the bathroom at home. He waited, letting Luna sniff his hands before he even reached for her. She flinched, but didn't run, ears pressed flat. He whispered nothing, just moved as if he belonged there, washing the cut with careful hands. The first time his fingers brushed her fur, her whole body went rigid, but she didn't bite or bolt. Elliot noticed her eyes. Wide, brown, full of trust and fear twisted together. He washed the wound, dabbed on the ointment, and pressed a fresh strip of gauze against the worst part. When he finished, he sat back, letting Luna decide what happened next. She surprised him by staying close. For a while, she just watched, sides heaving as she panted, but eventually she eased down onto her side, head resting on the moss, eyes never leaving his face. Elliot reached for his sketchbook, drawing her as she lay there, her eyes, her coat, the curve of her body outlined in slanting light. He found himself humming, quietly, almost a tune from childhood. Luna's ears flicked, but she didn't stir. He started to think of her as Luna all the time, though he never said the name aloud. It felt right. A moondog, wild and shining and wounded. Sometimes he wondered if she'd had another name, a different life with someone else. But it didn't matter. Out here, in this small pocket of peace, they were both starting over. The healing took days, each visit a slow, cautious dance. Luna learned to recognize Elliot's scent and the sound of his footsteps. She let him clean her paw, replace her bandage, and eventually stroke her head in slow, gentle circles. She watched him sketch, curiosity flickering in her gaze. As if she could see the world he built with every pencil stroke, Elliot, in turn, watched Luna with an artist's eye and a broken boy's heart. He noticed the way she held herself, always ready to run, always one breath from bolting. But he also noticed how she lingered, just out of reach, choosing to stay. The first time she nuzzled his hand, just a fleeting touch of her nose, his heart soared in his chest, an electric shock of hope and connection. The forest became their shared sanctuary. Rain or shine, Elliot returned, always with food and care and patience. Sometimes he brought a thermos of hot chocolate and sipped it while drawing, the steam rising in the chilly air. Sometimes Luna would sit beside him, head on her paws, her breathing calm and steady. He drew her eyes first. Every time it was her eyes, then her ears, her muzzle, the lines of her wounded paw. Slowly, his sketches grew more confident, capturing not just Luna's shape, but her spirit, the wildness and vulnerability, the courage it took to trust. He filled pages with her, sometimes surrounding her with tall redwoods, sometimes framing her silhouette against a crescent moon. Back at home, Elliot's mom started noticing the change. He was still silent, but there was a lightness to his movements, a purpose that hadn't been there before. He ate dinner without needing to be reminded. Sometimes he even cleared his own plate. At night, when he disappeared into his room, she'd hear the soft scratch of pencil on paper and let herself hope, just a little, that something was shifting. At school, Elliot stayed an outsider, but he found himself less afraid of the glances and whispers. When Olivia bumped into him in the hallway and apologized, he managed to nod. When Cody dropped his textbook in math, Elliot slid it across the desk without meeting his eyes, but something in the gesture felt easier, less weighted. All of it, every small step, was anchored to the silent bond he'd built with Luna in the woods. She was his first real friend in Eureka, the first living thing to see past the walls he'd built around himself. He started carrying the hope of their next meeting everywhere he went, a secret ember burning in his chest, or making the days just a little brighter. He never rushed. Trust, he'd learned, couldn't be forced. It had to be offered, gently, again and again, until it was strong enough to stand on its own. And in that quiet, sacred space beneath the redwoods, Elliot and Luna rebuilt themselves. One step, one breath, one sketch at a time. The rain came in soft waves that week, thickening the scent of pine and earth, soaking the moss so deeply that every step squished under Elliot's boots. He made his way to the woods, like always, shoulders hunched under his hooded jacket, sketchbook carefully wrapped in a grocery bag. The town seemed even quieter in the drizzle, with most people hiding indoors. But Elliot was drawn to the forest more than ever. Pulled by an invisible thread that started and ended with Luna, he found her waiting, nose tucked beneath her tail, fur slicked dark against her sides. She shivered when he arrived, more from habit than fear, but as soon as she saw him, her tail tapped a hopeful rhythm against the leaves. Elliot knelt down, letting the rain bead and drip from his hair, and slowly set out lunch, half a peanut butter sandwich, the last of yesterday's chicken, and a fresh apple slice. He watched her eat, close enough to see the healing pink line on her paw where the wound was finally closing. He'd done that, he realized. For the first time in a long while, he'd helped something mend. They sat together in the drizzle, just listening, rain on leaves, distant cars muffled by the trees, the creak and groan of the old log, the sharp snap of a jay calling overhead. Elliot opened his sketchbook, flipping to a fresh page, and started to draw Luna curled up beneath her leafy shelter. She watched, as always, following the dance of his pencil with her deep, curious eyes. This time, when he finished, he held out the sketch for her to see. He knew it was silly, dogs didn't understand pictures, but Luna seemed to study the paper, nose twitching, then looked up at him as if she understood anyway. Something about the moment felt big, but quiet, like he'd shared a piece of himself he could never put into words. By the end of the week, Luna's limp was barely noticeable. She was stronger, brighter, eyes sharper with each passing day. Elliot wondered what would happen when she was fully healed. Would she leave the forest behind? Would he come one day and find only paw prints in the mud, proof that he'd been alone all along? The thought made his chest ache in a way he couldn't sketch, couldn't explain. On Saturday, the clouds finally broke, and sunlight poured through the canopy in wide, golden stripes. Elliot lingered longer than usual, watching Luna chase drifting leaves and nose along the roots, tail swishing with a happiness he'd never seen before. When it was time to go, he stood and slipped his sketchbook into his backpack, giving Luna one last soft look. "See you tomorrow," he mouthed, the words silent as always. But that day, as he reached the edge of the woods near his backyard, Elliot felt something shift behind him. He turned and saw Luna standing on the path, head low, body poised as if ready to flee. But she didn't. Instead, she followed him a few steps, then stopped. Elliot's heart skipped. He kept walking, not wanting to scare her, but when he glanced back, she was still there, watching, waiting, as if trying to decide if she belonged in this new space. It became a pattern. Each afternoon, Luna trailed a little closer, paws leaving perfect prints in the wet grass. By Tuesday, she had followed him all the way to the edge of his backyard. Elliot paused at the porch, looking back with nervous hope. Luna sat just shy of the porch steps, chest heaving, eyes locked on his. He opened the door, half expecting her to bolt, but she stayed, sitting quietly on the old welcome mat, fur ruffled by the breeze, her presence both a question and a promise. Inside, Elliot's mom peered through the window, phone in hand. "Is that the dog you've been drawing?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with concern. Elliot nodded, gaze never leaving Luna. She's beautiful," his mom said, and for once, she didn't ask for more. She just left a bowl of water by the porch and returned to her emails. That evening, Elliot sat by the window, watching Luna through the screen as dusk settled in. He drew her silhouette in the golden light, her ears flicking at every sound, her tail curled neatly over her paws. He left the front door cracked, just a little, and put down a folded blanket nearby. Then he waited, pretending to read, while his eyes drifted to the shadow, outside every few seconds. The next day, it rained again. Luna waited through it all, sometimes pacing, sometimes curling into a tight ball to nap. Elliot felt her presence like a heartbeat in the house, steady and patient. Every evening he left the door open just a crack wider, his own silent invitation. Come in if you want to. Ease, no pressure, no rush. On Thursday night, a cold wind swept in from the coast. Elliot heard it rattling the windows, felt the chill creeping in, even beneath his yet heavy blanket. He wondered if Luna was warm enough. He padded down the hall, in his socks, checked the porch. There she was, curled up on the mat, fur bristling with the cold, but eyes open and alert, fixed on the sliver of light from the door. He sat inside, knees tucked to his chest, drawing Luna's shape in the dim lamplight. Every line was a prayer. Stay. Trust. Don't run. He left the door open and waited, hope fluttering wild and anxious in his chest. It happened around midnight. Elliot, half awake in the living room, heard a soft sound, claws on hardwood gentle as a whisper. Luna stood at the threshold, body trembling, eyes darting from the door to the boy. For a long moment she just stood there, soaking in the warmth, the light, the invitation. Then, without a sound, she stepped inside. She circled once, nose twitching, ears high and alert. Elliot held his breath, heart hammering. Luna looked at him, then curled up by his feet, close enough to touch, close enough to share warmth. Elliot set down his pencil, sliding quietly to the floor beside her. For a moment, neither moved. Outside, the wind howled and the trees swayed, but inside, a different kind of quiet bloomed, full of trust, hope, and the beginning of something new. In the silence, Elliot reached out, brushing his fingers through Luna's fur. She sighed and rested her head on his knee, her body melting into his side. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. In that small, silent space between them, words had never mattered less, and connection had never mattered more. Morning light filled the kitchen, casting pale stripes across the table and warming Elliot's arms as he finished his cereal. Luna lay curled up in the patch of sun by the door, still wary but more at ease in the house. Every so often her ears flicked at a sound from outside, the distant clatter of a garbage truck, a dog barking 2 houses down. But she didn't bolt. She simply shifted, keeping Elliot in view, her eyes never losing that gentle watchfulness. It had been 3 weeks since Luna first stepped over the threshold. Now she was a quiet fixture in their lives, moving through the house on careful paws, her body language always polite and hesitant. She slept on the old blanket by the fireplace, wandered the halls at night, and waited faithfully at the door for Elliot to return from school. She never barked, never made a fuss. She was a presence, solid, comforting, wordless. Elliot's days found a new rhythm, one that flowed around Luna's routines and his own. He still kept to himself at school, but there was less weight to the silence. The small indignities, the whispered jokes, the stares, still happened, but he carried Luna's steady gaze with him like an invisible shield. When he felt the prickle of eyes on his back, he pictured her waiting for him at home, tail swishing in slow, hopeful arcs. He found he could breathe through the hard moments, knowing that whatever else the day brought, Luna would be there. Each afternoon, they walked together through the woods. Sometimes Luna trotted ahead, nose buried in the ferns, tail held high. Sometimes she doubled back, brushing against Elliot's leg before darting off into the underbrush. He never leashed her. She didn't need it, as she never strayed far, always checking back to make sure he followed. The woods became their world, the towering redwoods, their silent witnesses. On rainy days, they sat by the fireplace, Elliot with his sketchbook, Luna sprawled beside him. He'd grown more adventurous in his art, venturing beyond Luna's form to include the shapes and shadows of the house, the angles of his mother's smile, the wild sprawl of the redwood branches. He drew their porch at dusk, the kitchen in morning light, Luna sleeping in every room of the house. His pencil grew bold, confident, the pages blooming with stories he couldn't say aloud. His mother noticed the shift first. She didn't mention it, but he caught her watching him sometimes, an unfamiliar softness in her face. One night she found him sketching at the dining table and set a mug of cocoa beside his elbow. "You've got someone new in your pages," she said gently, her voice barely above a whisper. Elliot glanced at his drawing. A quick, loose portrait of Luna stretched out in the sun. He met his mother's gaze, and for a moment something inside him unfurled. He looked down, a faint smile pulling at his mouth. She smiled back, as if she understood. His therapist, Dr. Simone, was the next to notice. "Your art's changing," she remarked, turning the sketchbook in her hands. "There's so much movement now, so much life." Elliot shrugged, but his heart fluttered. For months he'd only drawn the same handful of things: the forest, the log, Luna's eyes. Now his world was expanding. Even Dr. Simone's office for Juarez, with its patterned pillows and windows full of rain, made its way into his sketches. Dr. Simone flipped to a page filled with Luna, the dog peering through the back door, curled up on Elliot's bed, silhouetted against a sunbeam. "She looks happy here," Dr. Simone said, tracing the lines with her finger. "Is she?" Elliot nodded. "Are you?" Dr. Simone asked quietly. Elliot hesitated, then gave the smallest of nods. Sometimes, in moments like these, he almost wanted to speak. The words pressed against his chest, warm and nervous. He imagined what he'd say if he could. About Luna, about the comfort of silence, about the way a quiet presence could fill the spaces left empty by old hurts. At school, even Olivia noticed the change. "You're always drawing that dog," she said one day, at lunch, plopping down next to him with her tray roll. "What's her name?" Elliot's pencil paused above the page. He wanted to answer, to tell her about Luna, to explain everything, but the words tangled in his throat. Olivia waited, then shrugged. "She looks nice," she said, and wandered off. But she smiled at him in the hallway the next day, and Elliot found himself almost smiling back. Luna's impact rippled through the house in other ways. Elliot's mom started baking again, filling the kitchen with cinnamon and vanilla. She asked if Luna liked sweet potatoes and made a batch of homemade dog treats. On weekends, she joined Elliot and visited Luna for long walks through the neighborhood, waving at neighbors, sometimes even stopping to chat. People noticed the collie, her coat glossy and bright, her eyes full of quiet wisdom. Someone asked if they'd adopted her. Elliot's mom just smiled. "She found us," she said. That winter, a cold snap swept through Eureka. Nights dropped below freezing. Elliot dragged an old comforter to the living room, laying it out beside the fireplace for Luna. That night, Luna climbed onto the blanket and, after a moment's hesitation, placed her head on Elliot's outstretched arm. He froze, afraid to move, afraid to break the spell. Slowly he reached up and scratched behind her ears. Luna sighed, a deep, contented sound, and Elliot felt something in his chest loosen, a knot untangling at last. The next morning he woke to the soft weight of Luna pressed against his side. For the first time, and as long as he could remember, he felt rested, whole. He watched the sun climb through the trees, filling the house with gold. Luna blinked awake and licked his hand, her tail thumping gently against the floor. Elliot smiled, a real smile, small but true. From then on, the boundaries between boy and dog blurred. Luna followed him from room to room, curled up beside him while he drew, waited for him at the door. Elliot's mother made room for Luna in every part of their lives. She bought a collar, deep blue, and wrote Luna's name on a brass tag, though the dog wore it more as a promise than a possession. Luna was never leashed, never fenced in. She stayed because she chose to stay, and that made all the difference. As the weeks turned to months, Elliot's drawings grew into stories, silent narratives of healing and hope, of quiet days and small adventures. He drew Luna exploring the woods, napping on the porch, racing seagulls down by the rocky shore. He drew himself, too, less often as a shadow in the background, more often standing beside Luna, hand on her back, eyes open to the world. He filled sketchbook after sketchbook, the pages blooming with a life bigger and brighter than he'd thought possible. Some nights, Elliot sat by the window, and watched the stars wheel above the redwoods, Luna's warm body pressed close. He still didn't speak, not to his mom, not to Dr. Simone, not even to Luna, but the silence felt different now. It was no longer an emptiness or a cage. It was a space he shared, a gentle hush that meant trust and belonging. In the quiet, Elliot and Luna built a world of their own, one where every small kindness was a bridge, every shared glance a conversation, every moment together a step towards healing. The silence, once heavy and harsh, now hummed with the promise of new beginnings. And in that shared world, Elliot found something he'd almost forgotten, the simple, wordless joy of being seen and the hope that maybe, just maybe, he was finding his way home. Winter in Eureka arrived with a restless wind and rain that seemed to fall for days. The redwoods grew darker, deeper, their branches dripping and bending beneath the weight of water. Even inside the house, Elliot could feel the storm, a certain tension in the air, as if the whole world was waiting for something to snap. But for Elliot, life with Luna had settled into a gentle routine. She moved quietly through their days, bringing warmth and companionship, a silent anchor in the shifting tides of his world. But storms didn't always stay outside. Trouble came in ways Elliot hadn't expected. It started with the neighbor, Mr. Arlo, who lived 2 houses down in the weathered yellow bungalow. Mr. Arlo was retired, particular, and always watering his front lawn at the same hour every morning, waving stiffly to passing cars, frowning at anything that upset his careful order. He had noticed Luna early on, though she was quiet, well-mannered, and never strayed beyond the yard unless Elliot was with her. One chilly afternoon, as Elliot and Luna made their way back from the woods, they passed Mr. Arlo raking leaves along the sidewalk. Luna padded close to Elliot, head low but curious, her fur shining with rain. Mr. Arlo paused, straightening, his eyes sharp beneath his knit cap. "That your dog?" he called out, voice cutting through the drizzle. Elliot hesitated, his hand instinctively reaching for Luna's collar. He opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Not here, not now, not under the weight of a stranger's stare. Mr. Arlo stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "No leash? No tags? Dogs aren't allowed to run loose, you know." He looked pointedly at Luna, as if expecting her to suddenly bare her teeth and cause trouble. Elliot's mom, who had just stepped out to collect the mail, tried to smooth things over. "She's gentle. She's still settling in. We're keeping a close eye on her, I promise." Mr. Arlo grunted, unconvinced. "Just be careful. If she causes trouble, well, animal control's strict around here." That night, Elliot drew Luna curled up by the fireplace, but his lines were tight, nervous. He couldn't stop replaying the encounter in his mind, the feeling of being scrutinized, judged, threatened. Luna seemed to sense his worry, nuzzling her nose into his hand as he drew, a low whine vibrating in her chest. Days passed, but the sense of unease lingered. One evening, as a cold wind rattled the windows, Luna barked, a sharp, startled sound, when a raccoon skittered across the porch. It was the first real bark Elliot had ever heard from her. Not aggressive, just startled, full of instinct and energy. But the noise echoed down the street, sharp and clear. Moments later, Mr. Arlo's porch light flicked on. The next morning, there was a note taped to their front door, written in heavy, blocky letters. "Dog barked last night. Keep her quiet, or I'll call animal control." Elliot's hands shook as he read the note. His mother tried to reassure him, but he could see the worry on her face. She moved Luna's bed farther from this door, kept the windows closed, tried to keep the house as quiet as possible. But Elliot felt the walls closing in, each room shrinking with the threat that Luna might be taken from them. School became harder again. Elliot withdrew further, shoulders hunched, head down. He started eating less, drawing less, the spark that Luna had brought him flickering low. Even his sketchbook, the one place he had always felt safe, grew emptier, the pages filled with half-finished drawings, lines trailing off into anxious white space, and his mother noticed the change, but didn't know how to help. She tried baking his favorite muffins, leaving small notes on his pillows, inviting him to talk to Dr. Simone. But Elliot turned away from it all, feeling the old familiar heaviness settle in his chest. It was as if the world had gone gray again, every sound too loud, every look too sharp. He stayed in his room for hours, lights off, Luna's collar clutched in his hand. Luna waited outside his door, sometimes whining softly, sometimes scratching at the wood with a gentle persistence. Elliot wanted to open the door, to let her in, but the fear was too big, too loud. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her, not after everything they'd shared, not now that he'd found a piece of himself in her presence. One afternoon, as rain lashed the windows and thunder rolled in from the sea, Elliot lay on his bed, numb and exhausted. He heard his mom talking quietly in the kitchen, her voice low and tense on the phone. He caught fragments. He's just a boy. The dogs never hurt anyone. Please, can't we talk about this? Each word drove the fear deeper, a cold spike in his chest. For days, Elliot avoided the world. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't draw, wouldn't answer when his mother knocked gently, asking if he wanted to talk or walk or just come downstairs. Luna, too, was lost without him. She stopped eating, stopped wagging her tail. She sat outside his door for hours, sometimes pressing her nose to the crack beneath it, sometimes just waiting. Her body, a silent promise. Storms, Elliot realized, could come from anywhere. Not just outside, not just from the weather, but from fear, misunderstanding, the stubbornness of people who couldn't see what mattered. He curled up with his back to the world, clutching his sketchbook, wishing he could disappear, or at least hold on to Luna long enough to keep her safe. The world felt suddenly fragile, like one wrong move could break everything, and Elliot's silence, once a shield, now felt like a prison. He wanted to scream, to beg, to plead for Luna to stay, but the words would not come, so he did the only thing he could. He waited for the storm to pass, for Luna's gentle patience to remind him that trust could still exist, even in the darkest moments. Outside, the rain fell and the wind rattled the house. Inside, Elliot and Luna huddled in their separate silences, each hoping, in their own way, for the world to make room for them again. Rain had become a constant, relentless companion, beating against the house and pooling in silver puddles along the curb. The world outside blurred into a watery gray, the sky hanging low, branches shuddering in the wind. Inside, Elliot's room felt even smaller, crowded with shadows. He barely moved from his bed, staring at the ceiling, sketchbook unopened on the nightstand. Sometimes he drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes he just lay there, waiting for the day to end. Luna noticed the change, of course. She waited by his door, pressed against the wood, as if she could will herself inside. When she couldn't, she paced the hallway, nails clicking softly on the floor, sometimes whining at the base of the stairs. But Elliot's fear kept him frozen. The world had closed in, squeezing out the small joys he'd found. He was terrified that if he let himself hope, it would all be taken away. By the neighbors, by the rules, by the terrible luck that seemed to shadow him wherever he went. On the third night after Mr. Arlo's threat, the rain grew heavier, drumming a frantic rhythm against the window. The streetlights flickered in the downpour, casting long, trembling shadows across the yard. Elliot sat up, finally, drawn to the window by an urge he didn't understand. He wiped the fog from the glass and peered out into the dark. There, in the small circle of light from the porch, Luna waited. She was drenched, her fur hanging in heavy clumps, her head bowed against the storm. She didn't try to come in, didn't scratch at the door or bark. She just sat there, her body curled tightly as if she could weather anything if only she held still enough. Every few minutes she lifted her head, eyes searching the house, seeking out Elliot's window. Something inside, Elliot cracked. The sight of Luna alone in the rain, waiting for him, refusing to give up, broke through the heavy fog that had settled in his chest. He pressed his hand to the glass as if he could reach her, and felt tears sting his eyes. He'd been hiding for days, locked away by his own fear, but Luna had waited for him anyway. She had chosen him, even when he couldn't choose himself. As he hesitated at the door, a heart pounding so loudly he could hear it over the rain. His mom called softly from the kitchen, but he shook his head and slipped into the hallway, socks sliding on the polished floor. He paused by the front door, hand trembling on the knob. Thunder rumbled overhead, and for a moment he thought of turning back. But then he saw Luna, motionless, eyes still locked on his window, and the need to be with her outweighed everything else. He opened the door as quietly as he could. Luna didn't move, didn't even look up at first. Rain battered his face and soaked through his t-shirt, chilling him to the bone. He crossed the porch and knelt beside her, feeling the water pool around his knees. Luna raised her head, ears perked, and looked at him, not with accusation or disappointment, but with the same quiet hope she always had. Elliot didn't try to coax her inside. Instead, he just sat beside her, legs tucked up to his chest, and let the rain pour over them both. Luna shifted, pressing her damp side against his. He closed his eyes, clutching his sketchbook to his chest, the cardboard softening in the downpour. It didn't matter that the world felt unsafe. It didn't matter that he was scared, that the neighbors were watching, that tomorrow might bring more trouble. In this moment, there was only the boy, the dog, and the rain. They stayed that way for a long time. The cold seeped through Elliot's clothes, but he barely felt it. All he noticed was Luna's warmth at his side, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the gentle nudge of her nose against his knee. Time slowed. The storm became a distant drumbeat, a kind of lullaby that quieted the noise in his head. He felt, for the first time in days, that maybe he wasn't as alone as he thought. His mother found them just after midnight, the porch light catching the pale streaks of water running down Elliot's face. She didn't say a word. She stepped out, wrapped a blanket around them both, and stood with them in the doorway, her hands trembling. Elliot looked up, meeting her eyes, and saw the worry and love tangled together there. She reached out, smoothing his wet hair, then let him be, trusting him to know what he needed. Luna shifted, laying her head in Elliot's lap. He stroked her ears, feeling the water bead and roll off his fingers. He wished he could tell her what she meant to him, wished he could explain the weight she had lifted just by waiting. But in that quiet, in the hush of the rain, words didn't matter. Luna had chosen to stay, and that was all he needed. Eventually, exhaustion pulled at his eyelids. He curled closer to Luna, pressing his cheek to her fur, the steady thump of her heartbeat guiding him towards sleep. For the first time in a long time, Elliot let himself rest, not just his body, but the part of him that had been clenched tight for months. He felt safe, grounded by Luna's presence, sheltered even as the storm raged around them. That night, they slept side by side on the porch, curled together against the chill. The rain eased before dawn, tapering to a gentle drizzle. When the first gray light crept across the yard, Elliot stirred, stiff and cold, but oddly peaceful. Luna stretched and yawned, her tongue curling, then nudged his hand with her nose. He smiled, a small, tired, but real smile, and pressed his forehead to hers. Inside, the house was still. His mother had left a mug of cocoa warming on the stove, and a note by the door. "Come in when you're ready. I love you." Elliot read it twice, letting the words sink in. He glanced at Luna, who wagged her tail, and looked at him with infinite patience. He didn't know what the day would bring, if Mr. Arlo would complain again, if someone from animal control might show up, if the storm inside him would return. But for now, he knew this. Luna had waited for him, and he had found her waiting. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, one silent, hopeful step at a time. Morning arrived pale and quiet, the rain finally spent, a cool mist curling through the redwoods outside. Elliot blinked awake, on the porch, the coarse fibers of the blanket scratching his cheek, the ache of cold in his bones. Beside him, Luna was already stirring, her fur spiked in strange directions, muzzle tipped upward to taste the new day. For a moment they just breathed together, sharing the small warmth that had seen them through the storm. His mother found them there, still wrapped in the soggy blanket, Elliot's sketchbook pressed flat under his arm. She didn't say anything, not, "You'll catch a cold," not, "Come inside." She simply knelt and draped another dry blanket over their shoulders, her touch gentle and sure. It was enough. Elliot met her gaze, In her eyes, he saw not fear, but understanding. It was a look that told him, I see you. I see what matters. Inside, the house was full of a new kind of silence. Softer, less brittle, full of possibility. Elliot changed out of his wet clothes, hands stiff from the chill. Luna shook out her fur, sending drops flying, then padded to her corner by the fireplace and circled twice before settling down. The fire was already lit, flames licking at the logs, their warmth drawing both boy and dog closer. Elliot opened his sketchbook, flipping past rain-warped pages, searching for a blank one that wasn't ruined by last night's storm. He pressed his pencil to the paper, his hand trembling at first, then finding its rhythm. He drew Luna, her outline dark and solid, her fur ruffled and wild, her eyes soft and bright, filled with the memory of rain and the promise of sun. This time, he didn't stop there. He drew himself beside her, curled in the blanket, faces turned toward one another, as if sharing a secret. He filled the page with color, layering blue for the early morning light, gold for the first shy rays of sun creeping in through the window. For the first time in over a week, the lines felt alive again. The emptiness that had haunted his art was gone, replaced by the steady, gentle presence of Luna at his side. His mother watched from the kitchen, a mug of tea clutched between her hands. She didn't intrude or ask questions, just watched, her face softening with every line Elliot put down. When he finished, he turned the sketchbook toward her. She came to stand beside him, studying the drawing with quiet awe. You and Luna, she said softly. You're both stronger than you think. Elliot glanced at her, his mouth tugging upward in the faintest smile. He touched the page, tracing Luna's shape and then his own. There was a sense of belonging there, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. His mother leaned over and pressed a kiss to the top of his head, then left him to his drawing and his thoughts. Later that day, they ventured outside. The storm had washed the world clean, leaving behind a crisp, bright air and puddles that reflected the sky. Luna trotted through the wet grass, ears perked, tail waving. Elliot followed, boots squelching, the sketchbook tucked under his arm for safekeeping. The woods felt different, softer, as if the rain had swept away old fears, leaving only new beginnings. They found a patch of sun near the edge of the trees and sat together, Luna's head in Elliot's lap. He drew everything he saw, the moss glistening with dew, the wild ferns unfurling, the play of light on Luna's fur. He drew his mother, too, standing in the doorway, with her arms folded, watching them with a gentle pride. For the first time in months, his pages were filled with more than loneliness. They were blooming with color and hope. At their next therapy session, Dr. Simone noticed immediately. She thumbed through his sketchbook, pausing on the page where Elliot and Luna huddled beneath the blanket, rain streaming down around them. Looks like someone's part of the family, Dr. Simone remarked, her tone warm and knowing. Elliot's hand hovered over the drawing. He nodded. He wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. But he felt something inside him shifting, a kind of loosening in his chest. He wanted to tell Dr. Simone about the storm, about waiting with Luna in the rain, about how it had changed him. He wanted to tell her that Luna had stayed when he couldn't ask anyone else to. But the words wouldn't come. Not quite. So he showed her another drawing, this one of Luna curled in his lap, both of them surrounded by golden light. Dr. Simone smiled, understanding. Art can say what we sometimes can't, she said gently. You're telling your story in your own way, Elliot, and that's enough. School felt different too. Olivia noticed the change in his sketches, the way Luna now took up space on almost every page. One day in the cafeteria, she slid into the seat beside him, no longer asking questions, just sitting quietly and watching him draw. Cody, too, stopped making snide remarks, though he still watched from across the room, curious but less judgmental. Elliot felt a fragile kind of acceptance growing around him. Not quite friendship, but not loneliness either. At home, Luna's presence became a new rhythm in their days. Elliot's mother stopped worrying about rules or complaints from neighbors. She focused instead on keeping their little family together. She baked bread in the mornings, filling the house with warmth, and took long walks with Elliot and Luna in the evenings, the three of them weaving a gentle path through the neighborhood. Mr. Arlo, the neighbor, watched from behind his curtains but said nothing more. Maybe he saw the difference in Luna's eyes, or maybe he simply realized that some bonds were stronger than his rules. Either way, the threat faded into the background, replaced by a sense of cautious peace. Elliot's art continued to flourish. He filled page after page with scenes of Luna, sleeping by the fire, chasing crows in the yard, exploring the woods, basking in the sunlight that now seemed to find its way into every corner of their home. He drew himself, too, more often than before, sometimes standing, sometimes sitting, always with Luna by his side. In the evenings, as dusk painted the sky in shades of pink and lavender, Elliot would curl up with Luna on the porch, sketchbook open, breathing in the scent of earth and wet leaves. The silence between them was no longer something to fear. It was a comfort, a language all their own. Sometimes, Elliot would close his eyes and simply listen to Luna's breath, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind in the redwoods. The world was still uncertain, the future still unknown. But in the warmth of home and the gentle, steady light of Luna's friendship, Elliot found that he could face each new day with a little more hope, a little less fear. The silence that had once been his prison was now a sanctuary, filled with art, with love, and with the quiet courage to begin again. It was the kind of morning that made Eureka feel almost like spring, despite the calendar's stubborn insistence that it was still winter. Lights spilled across the kitchen in golden ribbons, and Luna was already up, nose pressed against the back door, tail wagging slow and steady as if she knew something special was about to happen. Elliot sat at the kitchen table, his sketchbook open before him, pencil tracing lazy lines as he watched her. His mom bustled around the kitchen, humming an old tune and slicing apples for a pie. She glanced at Elliot every now and then, her eyes softer than he remembered from the early days, less worried, more present, content with the fragile peace that had finally settled over their home. Elliot had been drawing Luna that morning, catching the curl of her tail, the alert tilt of her head as she waited for her adventure to begin. He liked the way the early light played along her fur, gilding it so she almost seemed to glow. It was becoming a habit, sketching Luna in every possible pose, filling his pages not just with her image, but with the feeling of her. Patience, hope, the silent promise that things could change. Suddenly, Luna tensed, ears pricking toward the window. In a flash, she bounded through the kitchen and out the open back door, nails skittering across the old wood floor. Elliot and his mom both startled at the sudden movement, following her to the doorway. In the yard, a black crow hopped along the fence, cawing loudly. Luna's head lifted, eyes bright with excitement. She darted into the grass, her body language more playful than Elliot had ever seen. The crow took off with a flutter of wings, and Luna barked. Once, sharp and joyful, the sound echoing across the damp morning air. Not a bark of fear, not warning, but pure, unbridled happiness. Elliot felt something shift inside him. He watched Luna chase the crow's shadow, barking again, and felt a wave of laughter bubble up, silent at first, then trembling in his chest. Without thinking, he stepped onto the porch, heart pounding in his throat. Luna, he whispered. The word hung in the air, soft and almost accidental, but real. His first spoken word in over a year. In the kitchen, his mother stopped mid-motion, the apple still in her hand, breath caught as if the whole world had gone silent just to hear what might happen next. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was Luna's happy yipping as she ran circles in the yard, chasing sunlight and shadows alike. Elliot felt the world contract around that single word, Luna, and then expand again, all at once. It was as if the name itself held a kind of magic, unlocking something that had been trapped and silent for too long. He repeated it a little louder this time. Luna. His mom pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shining with unshed tears. She didn't say anything, didn't rush to him, didn't break the spell. Instead, she simply stood and listened, letting the moment be what it was. a fragile, perfect step forward. Luna, hearing her name, spun and bounded back toward the house, leaping up onto the porch and pressing herself into Elliot's arms. She was warm and solid and alive, her tail thumping so hard it rattled the boards. Elliot wrapped his arms around her neck, burying his face in her fur, breathing in her wild, earthy scent. He didn't cry, though the feeling was so big, it made his chest ache. He just held Luna, and Luna let herself be held, quiet and trusting as ever. The world outside faded away. The worries about neighbors, the weight of the past, the ache of old wounds. For the first time, Elliot felt like himself again, whole and unbroken, capable of sharing the love he'd only been able to draw. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Elliot found himself humming under his breath as he sketched, the word Luna echoing in his mind. His mom moved gently around him, quieter than usual, her eyes always finding his, as if to reassure herself that yes, it had really happened. She called Dr. Simone and left a simple message. Elliot spoke today. He said Luna's name, and hung up before she could start crying. At their next therapy session, Dr. Simone smiled when she saw them. She didn't ask for the story. She just opened her office, let Elliot and Luna settle by the window, and waited for him to share when he was ready. Elliot didn't say much. Just a few more soft words. Only when he felt them, only to Luna. But Dr. Simone seemed to understand, her pride shining through in every gentle question and knowing glance. Word spread quietly through the house, then through the small circle of people who mattered. Olivia, at school, looked at Elliot with new curiosity. Offering a shy wave in the hallway, Cody stopped snickering altogether. Even Mr. Arlo, glimpsed from the window, seemed less stern, nodding stiffly in greeting, when he saw Luna trotting at Elliot's side. The silence, once heavy and hard, now felt different, a space that belonged to Elliot, shaped by his choice, not his fear. He still didn't speak often. He didn't have to. The people who loved him understood that words weren't the only way to share what mattered. At home, he and Luna spent hours by the fire, sketchbook open, the dog's head resting on his knee. Sometimes Elliot whispered her name, a ritual that made him feel braver each time he said it. Sometimes he didn't say anything at all, letting his drawings speak for him. The bond between them was wordless and unbreakable, a connection built from patience, trust, and the quiet courage it took to be found. Elliot's mother watched them, her eyes soft and bright, her hands always busy, making cocoa, baking pies, tending to the small world they'd created together. She stopped leaving sticky notes and started leaving small gifts instead. A new set of pencils, a blank journal, a leash for Luna, even though Luna never wandered far. Each gesture was an offering, a way of saying, I see you, I love you, I'm here. Where in the quiet, Elliot and Luna grew together, both stronger for what they'd endured. The boy who wouldn't speak had learned that silence didn't mean emptiness. It could be a place to heal, to grow, to choose how and when to use his voice. And as winter slowly yielded to spring, Elliot felt something inside him blossom, gentle and bright, as hopeful as the first crocus breaking through the thawed earth. Eureka's redwoods wore the first blush of spring, sunlight threading through the canopy in dappled gold, bringing new life to the ferns and wildflowers along the forest floor. The storms of winter had passed. The world seemed lighter now, as if some invisible weight had lifted, and the whole town could finally breathe again. For Elliot, life found a quiet, steady rhythm, a cadence that felt both new and achingly familiar. He and Luna fell into habits shaped by their trust, their friendship, and the gentle passing of days. Each morning, Luna greeted him with bright eyes and a thumping tail, waiting patiently while he pulled on his boots and slung his sketchbook under one arm. They would set out for the woods together, Elliot's footsteps matching the dog's soft, eager gait. In the hush of the forest, Elliot felt fully alive. The old ache in his chest had eased, replaced by something softer, a kind of wonder at how much could grow in silence. He noticed details he would have missed before, the way dew clung to Luna's fur, the shadows cast by sunlight slipping through branches, the soft patter of small animals in the underbrush. Each morning brought something worth drawing, something worth remembering. Elliot's sketches filled pages now. He drew Luna in every season, every mood, leaping after crows, dozing in sunbeams, standing sentinel beneath the ancient trees. He drew his mother, too, her face gentler now, softened by laughter and the shared quiet that had settled between them. Some days he drew himself, not hidden in shadows as before, but side by side with Luna, his hand resting lightly on her back. They were always moving forward together, step by silent step. Therapy became something different as well. Dr. Simone never pressured Elliot to speak, never measured progress by words alone. She simply listened, letting his drawings and the rare, whispered words he offered stand on their own. When he finally spoke, it was never because someone made him, but because he wanted to, because a feeling, or a memory, or Luna herself made it safe to try. One afternoon, as spring rain tapped softly at Dr. Simone's window, Elliot finished a drawing and slid it across the table. It showed him and Luna walking away from the house and into the redwoods, the trees arching overhead, the path ahead bright with promise. He glanced at Dr. Simone, then down at the drawing, his voice almost lost in the quiet. "She didn't fix me," he said, each word soft but certain. "She just waited, and I finally didn't feel afraid to be found." Dr. Simone smiled, her eyes shining. "That's more than enough, Elliot. You found your own way out." The words lingered with Elliot as he walked home that evening, Luna trotting at his side, rain glistening in her fur. He realized that healing hadn't come all at once. It had arrived quietly, in small moments, a wagging tail, a shared blanket in the storm, the comfort of simply being together. Silence, he understood now, wasn't something to be broken or feared. Some silences held everything that mattered: pain, hope, the slow work of trust. At home, Elliot's world kept growing. His mother's laughter returned, soft and genuine, filling the house with a music he hadn't heard in so long. She let go of the old worries, the need to fix everything with words. Instead, she built new rituals: baking on rainy days, movie nights with popcorn and cocoa, early morning walks with Elliot and Luna through the dew-soaked grass. Even the neighbors changed, bit by bit. Olivia sometimes joined Elliot in the woods, sketchbook in hand, the two of them sitting beneath a fallen tree, sharing pencils and ideas in easy, companionable silence. Cody too stopped by once or twice, always with an awkward joke or a question about Luna. The world felt less sharp, less full of edges and suspicion. Mr. Arlo, who once glared from his porch, now simply nodded as Elliot and Luna passed. One day, he even left a dog biscuit on the fence post, gruffly muttering, "Good dog." Elliot grinned, tucking the treat into his pocket for Luna's next adventure. Life wasn't perfect, and Elliot didn't expect it to be. There were still hard days, still moments when the silence pressed in and made him ache. But he no longer feared it. Instead, he learned to sit with it, to trust that Luna, and those who truly cared, would wait with him until he was ready. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he let his art speak for him. But always, Luna was there. Tail thumping, eyes shining with the quiet promise that he was enough. Exactly as he was. On the last day of school, Elliot brought Luna to meet his classmates. She sat patiently by his feet as Olivia introduced them, soaking up the gentle strokes and shy smiles. Elliot watched the way Luna looked at each person, steady, open, accepting. He realized in that moment that Luna's gift wasn't just for him. She had a way of making everyone feel seen just by staying present. That evening, as the sky blushed pink over Eureka, Elliot and Luna walked into the woods one last time before bed. The world felt wide and open, full of possibilities. Elliot reached down, letting his hand rest on Luna's head. She leaned into him, content and calm. He thought about all the silences they had shared, the lonely ones, the fearful ones, the healing ones. He understood now that some silences weren't meant to be broken. They were meant to be shared with someone who would wait without needing anything more. At his next therapy session, Elliot drew himself holding Luna's leash, both of them walking deeper into the redwoods. Above them, the trees arched high and safe, their branches sheltering every small step. He wrote one sentence in the corner of the page. Some silences aren't meant to be broken, just shared with someone who stays. And in the gentle quiet that followed, Elliot felt whole, his story finally his own. Some silences aren't meant to be broken, just shared with someone who stays. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who listens. And subscribe for more stories that don't need loud endings.